Hello, welcome to the next in the client case studies series. And in this series, all I'm trying to do is give you, in the next few minutes, a bit of an example of how we're helping clients so that you can spot the opportunities within your own clients for us to add value and help them. So this particular case was a client that came to us that was north of age 70, and his particular concerns were inheritance tax and the amount of inheritance tax his estate was going to be liable for as and when he passed away, and also the investment oversight. That he'd got a number of different investments and he needed help on looking at those. And just to give you an idea of the type of client he was, got about £1 million in his pension, he'd got about 800,000 in ISAs, he'd got about £2 million in other investments, he'd got an investment company as well as some other bits. And so his total inheritance tax liability was around £4 million. That's £4 million worth of tax to pay were he to die at that moment in time. So what did we do? Well, really what we did was we started looking at how we could minimize that inheritance tax. And at the time, he was drawing out an income from his pension. Well, a pension is free of inheritance tax, and if you die before 75, it's also free of income tax as well. So it doesn't make sense to be spending that when there's other assets that you could be spending. So we immediately told him to stop drawing a pension income. We were able to shift a load of his ISAs across to getting what's called business property relief. And this is a specific type of investment that once he's held it for just 2 years, it becomes free of inheritance tax. Now, it is slightly riskier than what you'd normally put in an ISA, but this guy already had very high risk investments in his ISA. So actually, we weren't increasing the risk really at all, but we were moving it from an environment where 40% of it was going to disappear on death due to inheritance tax, as opposed to none of it disappearing on death as long as he survived for 2 years, which actually this was much more than 2 years ago, so he's more than through that. What we were then able to start doing is looking at making a gift into a trust. Now, this client still needed an income, so we were using a discounted gift trust here so that he retained an income from the trust, but he gave up the right to the capital, which he was absolutely fine with because, as you can see, he's got plenty of money. He's not going to run out of money during his lifetime. So it's really about giving him access to it in the form that he needed, which is an income, but getting it outside the estate for inheritance tax purposes. What we also did was look at all the rest of the investments, and what we found was, despite the fact this was a fairly elderly gentleman, he had a very high risk investment portfolio. And whilst he didn't want to completely disturb that, because some of it had been doing very well for him, that was in an upward market, what we were able to do was we were able to say, well, okay, with these other investments, for example, inside your pension, let's offset this higher risk that you've got already by designing a more low risk, more balanced portfolio to try and complement that higher risk approach that he'd got elsewhere. Now, this particular client already had a bit of life insurance in place, what's called whole of life cover, to make sure that when he died, some of the inheritance tax liability was paid, but it was way short of the actual liability. And also it was reviewable policy. So therefore what happens is that policy gradually gets more and more expensive. And so what will happen is over time, when he gets into perhaps his 90s, it'll be so expensive, he'll probably want to cancel it. And so what we were able to do is put some guaranteed whole of life cover in place, which is a bit more expensive now, but it means that it will never get any more expensive. It means that he can definitely afford it right the way through, even if he lives to age 100. And that will put a lump of money in trust after him and his wife's passing, that's sitting there ready to pay some of the inheritance tax as well. And then finally, what we're able to do is look at putting the investment company into more like a family investment company arrangement using something called a succession trust. And that means that, again, we can take that outside of the estate from an inheritance tax point of view. So we went from his family situation being that there was going to be a £4 million worth of inheritance tax into a reduction of inheritance tax to actually nil potentially. Now, with the family investment company, there is some risk of that not working. It's not aggressive planning, but it's not, and we've used the best experts in the country on this particular planning. but there is a chance that it doesn't work. So we've actually still got the protection to make sure that the liability is a fraction of what it was historically, even if that planning doesn't work. We've also managed to reduce the risk of investments and protect his assets better. So he's a really happy client. We've been looking after him for quite a few years now, but we've got his family situation from a position of potentially paying £4 million in tax to paying no tax at all through legitimate, sound planning. So if you have any clients where you think that they're concerned, they might be concerned about inheritance tax because they've got large investments or property portfolios, then we'd really be very happy to help. So just send us an email or pick up the phone to us, and we'd love to try and help you identify how we might be able to help them. Thank you very much.